the helicopter came of age in Vietnam, with one invincible machine becoming the symbol of that war, the Huey. It was the warhorse of the airborne cavalry and medevac companies. For many young men flying these famous helicopters, it was a short-lived adventure.
A helicopter pilot in Vietnam was twice as likely to be killed in combat as an ordinary soldier.
Some missions were so dangerous, it was best not to think too much about the odds.
I often tell people it would have taken more guts not to go than to go. The rotors were over the outer perimeter.
Right. 40 years on, these pilots relived the most traumatic mission of their lives. Again and again, they flew back in to rescue over 100 soldiers caught in the crossfire of an ambush.
I just said to myself, I'm going to get shot in the back. And then I said, I'm going to get shot in the back and I'm going to live and I'm going to be a paraplegic. I mean, all this stuff was going through my head.
Vietnam, 1967. Tom Barker and Jack Swickard are pilots in their early 20s. As a keen amateur cameraman, Tom's unique record of their war is shown here for the first time. They've been flying Hueys in combat missions for less than a year. But by Vietnam standards, they're seasoned veterans. On May the 14th, 1967, they would set off on one of the most epic rescue missions of the entire Vietnam War.
Tom, does this make you homesick?
Surely does. It's a good aircraft.
Yeah, it's even got the armor in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's got the armor just like we had in Vietnam.
Hop in.
No, you jump up there.
Okay.
40 years on, the Vietnam veterans inspect an old friend, a Huey still in service with the National Guard in Santa Fe.
We used to navigate, remember, just with a map in our lap and going like hell, really fast, low, and it's basically just exactly like it was. You know, it's basic Huey.
Not quite as old as we are, but pushing it.
Tom Barker's co-pilot on the mission that fateful day was Larry Liss.
Is that Larry Liss?
Yeah, I've been called in to set the
I'll
record
be
straight.
damned. We called your wife last night.
She set you up.
Huh?
She set you up.
She set us up.
How are you? Jack, how you doing, man?
Long time
God
no
dang,
see.
I saw you walking up and I said, that's Larry. Holy cow.
We look a little
You
older.
age better than I have.
Yeah, right.
Huh?
Right.
This is amazing. I haven't seen you since what?
69, 70.
1970?
Probably. I got out in April 70.
Okay,
Right
I
from
went.
Fort Walters.
Yeah. I fell in love with a program on television called Whirlybirds, and I just used to watch that all the time, and I always thought that would be a good thing to do when I grow up. So I joined the Army at age 17, and subsequently they selected me for flight school.
We were on the Czech-German border during a snowstorm. And this one day, this guy came in a Huey, and he put down his window, and he had short sleeves, and he was drinking a cup of coffee, and I was freezing my butt off. And he just looked at me, and he said, "You're such a jerk." He used other words. I'm trying to keep it clean. "You're such a jerk." And I looked like, why? He said, "Look at you. You're freezing your ass off. It's snowing. It's sleeting. I'm here. I'm nice and warm." And he said, "Man, you should sign up for helicopter training." So the next day at the officers club, there was a sign that says, "We're looking for helicopter pilots." So I said, "Take me." Within 4 days, I was in the States going through flight school.
With the desperate shortage of pilots, the Army has devised a rapid flight training program. 4 months primary instruction at Fort Walters, followed by advanced training at Fort Rucker.
When I went to the primary helicopter school, the first 5 hours that we got as instruction was learning how to hover. That's the first thing you had to do. You didn't have to be real good at it, but that's how you landed and you took off in a helicopter.
At flying school, they learn how helicopters are able to perform this extraordinary feat. In a fixed-wing aircraft, the rapid flow of air over the wings generates lift when the plane travels forward fast enough. In a helicopter, its wings rotate. As the rotor blades spin through the air, they generate lift, even when the helicopter is not moving forward. But stationary flying, or hovering, is much harder than it looks. The pilot must make constant adjustments with both hands and feet to keep the helicopter steady.
While my whole class was able to take a helicopter after a couple hours and pick it up to a hover, I was already in the 9th hour and still couldn't hover. And you have to solo in 10 hours. So I couldn't hover. So now I'm beginning to panic, because if you don't get through flight school, then you go, whoosh, you're back on the ground again. And I was really scared.
I always had a pretty good control touch, and I could pretty much get the aircraft to do anything I wanted it to do without moving the cyclic control much more than the size of a silver dollar.
The cyclic is like the stick in a fixed-wing aircraft. Moving the cyclic changes the angle of the main rotor blades individually to make the helicopter roll to the side or point up and down. The left hand controls the collective lever. This moves the helicopter vertically, up or down, by altering the pitch of the blades collectively. The foot pedals change the pitch of the tail rotor. This alters the direction the helicopter is pointing, a bit like a rudder.
There were some pilots that had a poor control touch that moved that cyclic around a lot. And what happened when you did that was you would dump lift out of the rotor system, out of the rotor disc. So the better your control touch, the better performance you could get out of the aircraft.
They gave me a civilian instructor who flew around with me. Now in the air it was fine. When I got within 20 feet of the ground, I couldn't control the helicopter. So he got out and said, "You're not going to solo." I said, "You have to let me solo." He said, "You're not going to solo." I said, "You have to let me solo. I'll make it." He said, "No, you'll die." I said, "I'll make it." So he said, "Fine, go ahead." And he walked away. And I put my helmet on, and I went to pick the helicopter up to a hover, except I had wrapped the cord around my neck. So my head went back like this, so I had to lay the helicopter back down again. I straightened it out. The tower said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I just turned off the radio. And I just took a deep breath. I picked it up, and the helicopter was like this. But I got it off. And the first time I came around, you have to do it 3 times. I actually made it. That was feeling kind of good. And the second time I came around, it got really bad. The third time I came around, I was hedge hopping, like this. I got the last hedge and put the helicopter down and shut it down and ran out of the helicopter. I didn't even take it off the runway. So I had soloed. Out of 84, I think I was ranked 82. So I was really bad, all the way through. I was a bad pilot.
After 8 months of training, the pilots graduate to flying the Army's principal helicopter in Vietnam, the Bell UH-1, nicknamed Huey.
When we got to the Huey the first time, we were all in awe. And we always had that picture in front of us during our primary training at Fort Walters that, boy, that's what we really want to do. We want to fly the Huey. That is it. That was state of the art. That was the aircraft you wanted to fly.
Here's the tactical instrument ticket.
Yeah, I have one just like that. A license to kill yourself.
That's right. Do you know what mine said on the back? My instructor pilot said, "Remember, you are the worst pilot we have ever put through the program. You will surely kill yourself flying. Please don't worry about getting shot." That was on the back. That's what was handed to me.
Really encouraged you, didn't it?
Well, but he was right. He was telling me, don't get arrogant.
Within 2 weeks of finishing flying school, they're off to fly Hueys in combat assault missions in Vietnam.
Exactly what he told me.
The rookie pilots would be lucky to survive 6 months.
You know, it was pretty quick from flight school to fright school.
Fresh out of flight school, the new pilots arriving in Vietnam come to a divided country. Their role is to fly Hueys from their bases in South Vietnam in the war against communist North Vietnam. The combat assault helicopter companies use these powerful and robust machines to insert troops on the ground.
If you were going to be in a war, flying turned out to be a much better way to fight it than being on the ground with the mud and the leeches. We lived in a villa in downtown Benoit, so I commuted to the war each day. To this way? Okay. This was not even a road. It was just...
40 years on, Tom, Larry and Jack returned to Benoit, the small town where they were stationed, just outside Saigon.
That's the 2nd Field Force headquarters building right there.
Okay.
Okay? That's where I live, my 2nd. Remember when I took the picture off of the balcony? I was shooting down on that road right there.
Okay.
Okay?
Wow, things change in 40 years, don't they?
We had long days. When we came back at the end of the day, we were tired. And we'd go back to the villa and we'd get a little bit drunk, you know? and then we knew we had to get up early the next morning and go fly again.
1 in every 18 helicopter pilots never made it home. But as the survivors clocked up thousands of hours of flying in less than a year, it did not take long for them to become battle-hardened. In 9 months, Larry Liss went from being a hopeless rookie to a maverick ace who was prepared to put his neck on the line to save others. One day he was flying an unarmed VIP Huey when he saw another helicopter crash land. Despite his own helicopter being totally unequipped for combat, Larry's instinct was to fly in and save the crew from capture by the Viet Cong.
We got in really quick. Everybody jumped in. We beat it out of there, and everybody's yelling and screaming for joy, you know. And we landed them, and I shut the aircraft down. We didn't take any hits or anything like that. A couple hours later, I was in front of my commander, who basically chewed me out for going and pulling these people out. I couldn't understand why he was so upset. And he was upset because I disobeyed a direct order and written orders. And I said, okay, but we saved these people. And he couldn't hear it. He couldn't hear it. So basically he said, if you ever do it again, I'll get you thrown out of the Army.
Only a week later, it's Easter Sunday, and Larry Liss's future in the Army is about to be in even greater jeopardy. His flying buddy, Tom Barker, has just 12 days to go before his tour of duty is over. So the last thing he wants is trouble from above.
They were taking it kind of easy on me and not flying me too hard. So Easter Sunday, they said, well, you go out and fly the staff chaplain with Captain Liss, and so we did.
There was like a call, could you fly with Tom Baca? Because nobody's around to fly. Everybody's like taking off on Sunday, and I said, sure, I'll go. Sunday's fine, you know, milk run. They call them milk runs, right?
I had a VIP aircraft. It was a basic Huey, and I had a couple of individuals that wanted to fly with us that day in addition to the chaplain, just to see the country. They didn't know what they were getting into that day, and of course we didn't either.
As Larry and Tom wait for the chaplain, they're told of a group of soldiers out in the jungle who need rescuing. A company of some 100 South Vietnamese troops, led by US Special Forces, has been raiding the communist supply lines from the north, along the infamous Ho Chi Minh Trail. Their mission has gone badly wrong. Ambushed by the North Vietnamese army, they're hopelessly outnumbered and radio for help. Another Huey raced to the rescue. On board, Special Forces medic Jim Dopp. Flying over the scene, he was horrified by what he saw out of the Huey door.
It was really, really dense cover, and there were some tall trees there. I don't know how they were going to try to set that thing down, but in the meantime, they were going to drop me down on a rope.
Just as Jim was about to launch himself out of the door, the tail rotor clipped a branch.
When he hit the tree, the helicopter really started to buck, and I thought we were just crashing. You're looking at the ground trying to figure out which way you're going to run when you hit the ground. You try to watch if you can see any of the fire, if you can see any of the flashes, you want to see what you can so that you're not running toward it. The guy flying it moved us up and away and set down on a highway, maybe a kilometer from where we were. He put the helicopter down there because he said it was going to crash otherwise.
After a quick inspection of the badly damaged tail rotor, the pilot risks flying the Huey back to camp. Despite his narrow escape, Jim Dopp is determined to go back to save the people left behind. He approaches the only other helicopter at Khao Song Bay, Tom and Larry's unarmed VIP Huey.
The first thought was like, oh goody. They're like, come on, let's go. And the second thought was, this is bad, because this is not my helicopter. There's no guns. I don't remember ever flying in an aircraft without guns. So this was, you feel nude somehow. But I didn't give it a second thought. I should have, but I did.
We were the only helicopter there, and they needed our help, and you know, we were not going to say no. I mean, we weren't going to say no.
Once again, Larry Liss finds himself in an unarmed VIP helicopter not meant for combat. He'll be accompanying Tom to a landing zone where more than 30 soldiers have already died.
My remembrance of this thing was we knew exactly where we had to go, and we flew at altitude for a little bit, then we got right down on the deck. And we didn't know that we were going to run into bamboo when we did.
As they approach the landing zone, they fly low, keeping the fuselage along the trail and the rotors just above the tall trees on either side.
Generally, they'll come down 2, 3, 4 feet off the ground, and you just jump the hell out. That's the normal way to insert. In this particular case, there was no LZ. There was just this really heavy vegetation.
We looked down and we couldn't see the troops because of the bamboo and the thick vegetation. And they said, oh, you're right over us right now. Can you land? And Larry and I are looking at all this stuff and we're saying, well, we can try.
The situation is desperate, but glimpsing a very narrow opening in the bamboo, Tom and Larry decide the only way of getting down is to create their own landing zone. They're going to have to use the rotor blades to cut through 40 feet of bamboo. It's an action that could easily lead to disaster, even in the famously robust Huey.
I had a sense that we could cut the bamboo. I didn't know how long the blades would last. But there was no other way to do it. The only other way was to leave. And that was, you had to take the shot.
Tom takes the controls and descends into the battle. The blades start to slice through the canopy.
We started down through the bamboo, and it wasn't real thick, but I mean, it was damaging the blades. And it was pretty noisy going down through that. We were a lawnmower, basically, is what we were doing.
The Huey's rotor blades have a strong leading edge of stainless steel. The rest is an aluminium honeycomb wrapped in a layer of thin steel. This bamboo is tough. A lump ripped out of the edge will unbalance the whole rotor system. Damage to the underside of the blade would ruin the aerodynamic surface and cause the Huey to fall out of the sky.
I did some temporary duty at the Bell helicopter plant as a production test pilot, and I used to love to walk through the factories. I know that one of the most important employees of Bell Helicopter was a little guy that went along in the blade shop and tapped on the blades to make sure that there were no voids in the honeycomb structure. I knew that as long as I didn't damage the stainless steel leading edge, I'd be in good shape.
Yet Tom's main concern is his machine's Achilles heel, the delicate tail rotor.
There was just no room. You got to understand, this trail we were landing on was just about wide enough for the fuselage of that Huey to go down into. My margin of error on knocking that tail rotor off was maybe about a 15 or 20 degree turn in either direction. It was that narrow. Had we lost that tail rotor, we'd have lost the aircraft for sure.
Both pilots keep their hands on the controls in case one of them is shot.
That's something you learn, but I never really did. I mean, every mission I ever flew, every combat mission I ever flew, I kind of stayed close, but I don't remember ever staying that close, because that was real. That was like really, that was a little too close, and either one of us could have gotten it. Either one of us.
As soon as they touch down, the first wounded are loaded. Tom, Larry, and Jim face a shocking scene.
You saw people taking rounds on the ground. There were people that were trying to move toward the helicopter that didn't make it. It was probably the most intense combat that I was ever in, directly exposed to small arms. I was scared.
So that's very representative of what we were looking at.
4 decades later, the crews return to the landing zone. It looks as challenging today as it did then.
This is what it was, but the whole road was like this.
Yeah. There was a lot of bamboo with a diameter about like this, and some of it might have been a little bit thicker.
It could have been.
Yeah, it could have been like
the edges up there.
the edges up here.
It was definitely like that, hanging over the road.
Yeah, and I mean, you could hear the rotor blades chopping through that.
Right.
It was just like a buzzsaw, and
Sound like a weed whacker.
yeah, weed whacker. Yeah.
It was amazing because they were the end of the perimeter. They were laying here and laying here, and the enemy forces were no more than 25 yards.
Yeah.
And you could see them shrinking the perimeter. So it was like on both sides. It was unbelievable.
They pick up 6 casualties. Other wounded are pinned down by the North Vietnamese. After 3 minutes under intense fire, Tom and Larry decide they have to lift off. Tom pulls the helicopter straight up over 40 feet of vegetation. He needs to follow the track he came in on, so he spins the helicopter round and heads back to the camp. In the back, Jim's focusing on his seriously wounded patients.
It's a lot easier to focus when you have wounded because you're not focusing on what's going on around you, which is the scary stuff. One guy got hit in the upper shoulder, and I was worried that his subclavian artery might have been cut, and so I'm focused on that, and I'm not afraid anymore.
On the 15-minute ride back to Khao Song Bay, Tom and Larry receive another desperate radio message. Those left behind are completely pinned down by an ever larger North Vietnamese force. The entire company of over 100 men now needs rescuing. To save them all, the pilots will have to make several trips back to an increasingly hot landing zone.
So you don't have a chance to play it out on the first time around because you don't know how bad it is. The second time around, you know how bad it is. And then you know the possibility of a continuous existence is the odds are shrinking dramatically. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the perimeter has to shrink. And ultimately, you have to be left with no perimeter. And ultimately, you have to be left with little or no odds.
The pilots face a bleak decision. To return seems virtually suicidal. Yet not to return means abandoning their comrades to almost certain death.
This is Vanguard 1 on guard. Is there anyone up on this frequency?
Tom calls for backup on the emergency channel for any aircraft in the area that might be able to help. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice.
This is Thunderbird 5 Alpha. This is Vanguard 1. I copy.
Warrant Officer Grade 1 Jack Swickard is from Tom's former unit, the 118th. He's also from Tom's hometown, Albuquerque.
I knew Jack was a very good pilot, so I was very glad that he was there.
Jack touches down on the dirt strip at Khao Song Bay. Tom quickly fills him in on the dire situation at the landing zone. They work out a plan to go back.
And I said, well, I've got 2 machine guns. I said, why don't I lead in? And he said, well, that's great. I often tell people it would have taken more guts not to go than to go. I just could not turn down people who were in trouble, who we might have a chance of pulling out.
Flying that day with Jack is Al Croteau, an avionics engineer out to see Vietnam from the air on his day off from ground duties.
I was expecting to be sitting back there with my camera and taking pictures at every spot that we landed and having just a great, calm, wonderful Sunday.
I knew Al had not really come on a mission to get in the middle of a fight. I said, Al, you don't have to go in with us if you don't want to. And he said, no, I'm going in with you.
I trusted Jack. I had all the confidence in the world in Jack's ability. So I was going for the ride. Whatever came up, came up. That was it, no fear. So, let's go.
But after the first time in, Tom has some serious concerns about the state of his helicopter.
I kind of looked up at the blades, and I kind of went, I wonder if I really want to look at those. I wonder if I need to shut this thing down and take a look at those, but we didn't have time.
They take off, with Jack in the lead.
Okay, here we go. We're on with you.
They hurtle low through the trees, along the narrow trail to the landing zone.
We were able to drop the fuselage of the aircraft over the road, a little bit under the tree line, and keep the rotors above the tree line. We went as fast as we could, trying to maintain the element of surprise. We didn't want them to hear us coming, so if we were low, they wouldn't hear us until the last minute.
Often in combat assaults, Hueys fly in a staggered formation with overlapping rotors. But down at tree level, this isn't possible. Jack and Tom are forced to fly one behind the other. This brings its own dangers.
A lot of times when you landed in a formation into an LZ and the aircraft were fairly close together in formation, you would get rotor wash off of the aircraft behind you, and that would push the tail boom one way or the other, and you'd just correct with the appropriate pedal to keep the aircraft aligned with the direction you wanted to land in.
You know, a Huey makes a lot of noise, particularly when it's about 30 feet above you. It's shuddering, you're hearing the engine noise, you're hearing the blades whacking, and I was hoping it would throw off the aim of anybody who might be tempted to fire at us.
With bullets all around him, Al returns fire immediately, but his door gun jams. He takes out his handgun.
The 45 automatic pistol is a useless gesture, and I realized that when I fired the last of the 9 rounds. You know, I put it back in the house. I said, this is stupid.
Just as Tom did before, Jack has to chop his own space through the bamboo for a landing zone. He carves his own 48-foot circle.
I had never done it before. I had nicked a few leaves in earlier operations, but I had never consciously lowered the aircraft down through trees, cutting my way down. We kept it very, very still, did not want to hit larger branches than we had to, didn't want to hit the wider part of the bamboo, which is very, very strong. I didn't know how much that rotor blade was going to take.
As the blades hit the bamboo, Tom knows the blade's structure and aerodynamics will be seriously compromised.
We could hear the blades whistling right after we landed.
Now both helicopters have made it down onto the trail, but there is panic on the ground.
People started handing me bodies, and these were Vietnamese soldiers who had been shot, and we started loading them into the helicopter. And I looked down, and there was this one Vietnamese soldier who unfortunately had lost his head, and I said to myself, well, I need a rifle or something to protect myself if the helicopter goes down. So I grabbed the carbine, wiped his brains off of the carbine, and I felt a little bit more secure that if we went down, at least I had something that I would use to defend myself.
Tom and Jack signal to each other to lift off.
At the moment, I turned it into a game, which is, I think, how I handled the possibility of dying. I said to myself, okay, if we can get in and out, then the score is 15-0. You know, we pulled 15 people out, they got nobody. Then we came in for the second pass. If we get in and out, the score is 30-0. We're winning. And I also said to myself, okay, if I die now, so the score is 30-1. Not good that I'm dead, but it's not a bad count. So I'm smiling about it now, but somehow it put me in a game. It had me be more aggressive.
Time and again, the pilots return to rescue the trapped soldiers.
Each trip in, as we're going in, I'm trying to figure out how much damage I had taken on the main rotor blades, how much fuel I had on the aircraft, how many people could I take out.
My job is to take care of the wounded. So what I did is I went to the hospital, and then for the rest of the day, they just continued to bring in wounded.
It's the fifth run into the landing zone. The confines of the approach path had repeatedly forced the pilot into the same narrow funnel. They've made themselves easy and predictable targets for the North Vietnamese.
I gotta tell you, we were all stressed. I mean, this was difficult. Each time we took people out and came back to get more, there were less troops on the ground to defend the landing zone.
The defense perimeter made by the ambushed company is now so close, it's underneath the sweep of the rotor blades. For those scrambling to get onto the helicopters, there's no place to hide.
At one point, the soldiers who had been on board or were climbing aboard, if they came across a body, I saw them throw it off to the side. We didn't put any of the dead on board. That was room for the living. We needed to keep them alive.
We were just amazed. They were shooting people getting on the aircraft, but they weren't shooting us. And we were just waiting. We just thought, oh, it's just any second.
Amid the flying bullets, Larry leaves Tom at the controls and jumps out.
People were struggling to get on, and we would have had to come back again. And I got out, and I shoved 3 or 4 people on. And I just said to myself, I'm going to get shot in the back. And then I said, I'm going to get shot in the back, and I'm going to live, and I'm going to be a paraplegic. I mean, all this stuff was going through my head.
I mean, he's got an infantry background, special forces background, and so, you know, he was a hard-charging guy, and he got out with his AR-15. I think that's what you were carrying.
The CAR-15, yeah.
CAR-15. And he was out there fighting. And I was just sitting there waiting to die and holding on to controls. And
You told me there were bullets flying by me, and I didn't, until you told me that. I said, oh, I don't remember the bullets flying by. I just remember throwing people on or pushing people up. I don't remember anything else.
Yeah, I saw a few get hit on the aircraft, and that's...
Especially on ours.
Yeah, you had several hit on the back of yours, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't understand why they didn't get us, because the doors were open. They were shooting them in the back of the aircraft.
Because they were aiming at us.
Yeah, and
Think about it.
Adjusted, right?
No, they were aiming at
way
us.
off.
You know, everybody, you watch movies like people shoot once and they get the person.
No, that's
it's not real.
No.
Not real.
No.
You know, people are shaking.
But why didn't they disable the aircraft?
I'm sure they tried.
You know, I mean, it only takes one round through a
I have a theory
plane.
on it.
I think it was too dense.
I think it was too dense.
I think that's why mortars didn't
But I
come in.
also think they did not want to disable one of those helicopters on the ground, because then there would
Everybody
be
would come in.
lots of people there really fast.
I just think we were lucky.
We were.
Damn lucky.
We were. When you are pulling people out of a hot situation and you are the last aircraft to go in, most of the folks are going to jump on board your aircraft.
I had to push people off the helicopter because we would have been overweight. And if we had added people, we would have crashed. It was simple mathematics.
Jack's helicopter has the extra weight of machine guns and ammunition. Larry and Tom's totally unarmed helicopter is lighter, and so can take more people on board.
On the last trip out, I think I had 22 on the aircraft. There was at least one on the landing gear skid, because that's the only place he could get. And Larry List was actually holding on to him for part of that trip back.
I reached out and held these guys by like this part, these South Vietnamese guys. I was holding them, and you could see in their eyes that they were elated that they got out, and they were scared to death that they would fall off. But they hung on. They hung on. It was like really, it was great.
That's the most I ever carried on a Huey, was 22 people. And I mean, they wouldn't all even fit inside. That's why Larry was holding on to a few. But then we were worried that if I got shot,
How could I get on the controls?
you know, he had to be on the controls. So once the fellas on the skids were, you know, they were situated where they could hold on to stuff, Larry got back on the controls, which is, you know, good.
A Huey, overloaded with 22 men, cannot go straight up. To take off, it needs a runway, just like a regular aeroplane. This is known as a running takeoff. This demonstration shows how the helicopter skims the ground. As it gains speed, more air moves through the rotor disc, and the blades become more efficient, helping lift the aircraft into the sky. The point at which the aircraft starts to fly is known as translational lift.
It would take, I would have to say at least 50 yards. We could get into translational lift about over there, maybe just another 10 or 15 feet beyond. You might bounce the skids a few times, but once we hit there, the aircraft started to come up. If you didn't fly the aircraft correctly, you could lose that translational lift
and
drop back down into the trees. So you had to have a really good control touch.
We had already come out of the LZ, so you were able to hit the spot we had cut, which gave you some clearing
We had like
for your run.
distance.
Right.
Yeah, we had double
Okay.
distance.
We didn't have a lot of RPM left.
Yeah.
No.
You could almost see the rotor blades
Right. Well, you were overloaded.
because you had dragged the RPM down so much.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God.
You know, I was really sweating getting out of there that last time because I didn't know we were going to be able to do it, and it would not have been good to have to stay, but.
Well, yeah, because we'd have had to come back a sixth time to pull you guys out.
Low on fuel, with damaged blades and overloaded, the fifth trip has to be their last. Jack lifts off first.
As we were taking off, I looked down, and in one of these circular pits, there was one Vietnamese soldier holding the ground. And I said to myself, oh my God, we've left someone behind. To this day, that's all I can see is this one individual standing his ground and protecting our lives, and we're leaving him there, and I've never forgotten that.
Later intelligence revealed the massive size of the enemy force they'd faced.
This was a whole hell of a lot more than a platoon or even a company. They later identified it as probably a battalion of the 273rd Regiment. Battalion 500-600 guys.
They bring the survivors back to Khao Song Bay. Now the adrenaline rush wears off. They have hardly a moment to take stock of what has just happened.
When I checked my weapons, they were empty. And to this day, I don't remember firing them. I mean, I know I did. I might have fired them when I got out of the aircraft, but I don't remember firing them. They were just empty.
Despite being perilously low on fuel, they're anxious to head home to Bien Hoa before nightfall. Unaware of the full extent of damage the bamboo has inflicted on their rotor blades.
My remembrance of the helicopter was that it was really shuddering.
There's no doubt that had we shut the aircraft down, we'd have seen the damage on the blades, and we would not have tried to fly it. When those blades are spinning, you can't see those blades. You know, you can't see the damage it's done.
When their commanding officer finds out, their reputations may be as damaged as the blades.
It seemed like it took forever to get back because we're waiting for the low fuel light to come on, and Fortunately, that blade just kept turning and it kept lifting, and it was noisy and it was whistling, but it was doing its job. We got the low fuel light during the shutdown. That's the mission day there, 10.7 hours. I don't remember flying that much that day, but I guess we did.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can remember the time of day we got back because when I landed, it was just beyond dusk. It was starting to turn dark.
Right.
And I got out of the aircraft and I went to inspect the rotors, and it was too dark to see them without a flashlight.
Ours, it looked like a giant cat had taken it and scraped the cover off, and underneath was the honeycomb.
Okay.
So all along the rotor blades, it looked like some big monster had done that. That aircraft was a mess.
That evening, as the senior ranking officer in the mission, Larry is called into the 2nd Field Force headquarters. A major reminds him of the standing orders, not to fly VIP aircraft into combat situations. He demands to know how Larry broke his helicopter.
He just absolutely freaked out on me. Rather than a commander saying, way to go, and by the way, we'll get your helicopter fixed, it was, you know, Larry Liss, you're a dirtbag, you don't follow orders. He said to me, you're not the kind of officer we want in the Army. He's just yelling and screaming at me, and I smiled. I did something, and he pushed me. And I went flying over a chair. And in those days, I think it was a big mistake to push me, because I bounced back up and punched him. And then all these staff people jumped in and pulled us apart. And then the general came on the scene.
I'm not going to accept charges.
And the general said, it was a bad thing that you did, disobeying a direct order. It was a great thing that you did, disobeying a direct order.
Very good.
He said, look, what you guys did was exceptional, extraordinary.
In one of the most heroic helicopter missions of the Vietnam War, Tom, Larry, Jack, and Al rescued over 100 people. They pushed the Huey to the limit. They put their own lives on the line, and they survived. For Al Croteau, meeting Tom and Larry for the first time since they flew that last mission on Easter Sunday 1967 gives him the chance to lay one last ghost to rest.
I am just so happy that I got a chance to meet Larry and Tom, but I'm even more thrilled at the fact that you picked up that one last soldier. I had worried about that one last soldier for 40 years.
Right.
And finally you put it to rest.
Right.
That you did save him, and I want to thank you for that so much.
You're welcome. There was nobody alive when we left.
I know.
Okay?
I don't really believe I knew what a thing we had pulled off until after I got back, and people were talking about it at the bar before I even got to the bar, and I said, must have been great, you know, or must have been something that I can be proud of. And then I went home 2 weeks later, and I went looking for girls.
Did you find it?
Yes, I found one, and I'm still married to her. I actually did not know I was going to get an award for it until I got back to the United States, and I was told that I was being given the Distinguished Flying Cross for that mission. And I got a Soldier's Medal too, but the DFC is the one that was really important to me.
For their heroism, along with Tom, Jack and Larry were also awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and Al, the Air Medal.